Hey, what's up, everybody? It's the Duke here, coming at you again with a little BTS. That's behind the scenes, not whatever the BTS Korean pop band stands for. So, this is going out to everybody. Normally, behind the scenes stuff is going to be just for our patrons. By the way, if you haven't checked out the Patreon, I'm gonna say Patreon, because that's the way I've been saying it, so perfectly valid. So if you haven't checked out that site, I'm gonna throw the link down there in the YouTubes. Feel free to check it out. If it's something that you have the means and the opportunity to go ahead and throw a couple of bucks my way, awesome. Thank you. You are fantastic. If not, and you just rather tell somebody that maybe does have the means and ability to spend a little bit of that paper, great. Thank you as well. That's fantastic as well. So I'll throw that down so you can check it out. Normally, this type of video would just be for those patrons, but this is going up to everybody just so you can kind of see the kind of stuff that you might be spending your hard-earned money for. So welcome everyone. It is a new week, and I've got, if you see behind me here, whoop, I've got a dice mold. So this right here, it's silicone. You may have seen the video where I talked about pouring this, and it's Umu 30. It's from Smooth On, this particular stuff, because I'll tell you why it's Umu 30 and not like Sorta Clear or something like that. Because this is tin cure silicone, because I've got in here, I'm gonna demold them for you in just a moment. I've got resin, UV resin, that's important to note, not epoxy resin, UV resin dice masters in here that I did not have a mold of, so I wanted to, this is the first mold I've made ever, so that's why it's a little bit of wonk. But this right here, this is a tin cure silicone because it is the only silicone that will cure properly with UV resin. So if whatever you're molding came out of one of these bad boys, bad man pajamas right here. So this is a UV resin printer. It takes this stuff right here. Eco UV resin. Liquid stuff. Takes liquid, turns it into a solid, and then with UV light, the magic of UV light, cures it and makes it strong. So if you're working with UV resin, tin cure silicone is the only thing that you can use to make molds with that UV resin material, because it's the only thing that will set up properly. If you try to use the platinum cure silicone, you're never gonna get a solid. This is kind of rubbery, but you're never gonna get a solid mold. It's not gonna set up correctly around your UV resin. Now, once you have these, because the advantage of, if you don't know, the advantage of platinum cure silicone is it lasts for a really long time. Super flexible, doesn't tear, or at least doesn't tear under normal operating procedures. Lasts for a really long time. You get a ton of casts out of it. Great stuff. But if you're using UV resin, you got to use this first. It's a lot more brittle, less stretchy, tends to tear, breaks down after a handful of casts, maybe 8 or 10, and you have to throw them away. You use new ones. So what you do is you use your UV resin master in your tin cure, then put epoxy resin in there, make new masters, and then use those new epoxy resin masters to make your platinum cure silicone molds. So definitely some inside baseball there. But if you're interested in doing this on your own, whether it's as a hobby, as a job, as whatever, if you're just, hey, the guy on the internet makes it look easy, I can do that too. You absolutely can. So so this is the Umu 30 tin cure silicone. I believe it's 2 16-ounce bottles, so a total of 32 ounces of material once you mix them together, because it's 1-to-1 ratio. You've got your silicone, and your hardener. Mix them together, and then after, this took 6 hours to cure. Well, 12 total, because there's a top and the bottom. So you mix those together, you have about 30 minutes of working time. You really only need 5 to mix it, and then another few to pour it in. And then with this, I didn't even use a vacuum chamber. There are a few bubbles in the top of the lid that I poured. If I hold the light just so you can kind of see the bubbles. But I mean, that's not going to affect the quality of your cast. You don't want to use a pressure pot. So when I use these terms, again, this is inside baseball. So if it doesn't apply to you, skip forward a little bit. But when I use the term pressure pot versus vacuum chamber, they do two different things. Pressure is pressing in, right? It's squeezing whatever's in there. So if you've got resin that might have bubbles inside, it's squeezing that resin and forcing the bubbles out to wherever your vent may be. Usually it's on the top, but it might be on the side, or wherever you built that vent for the gas to escape. That's a pressure pot. That's what a pressure pot does. A vacuum chamber actually sucks all the air out, so it allows whatever material you're working with to expand. And with silicone, especially when you're molding something, and the liquid is what you're molding instead of you're creating a mold instead of creating a cast. So with the mold, the liquid is surrounding whatever you're molding. With a cast, the liquid is what's inside the mold. So I know it's a little conceptual, but basically if you have something hard and something liquid in the center, to get the bubbles out of the liquid, because that's what you're interested in, you want to get the bubbles out of liquid. To get the bubbles out of the liquid when it's in the center, that's when you use a pressure pot. So when you're casting, that's when you want that pressure to squeeze the bubbles out. If you're molding, if you're creating a mold, so the liquid is outside of the center is hard and the liquid is surrounding, ideally you would want to use a vacuum chamber to pull those bubbles to the surface. Because if you use a pressure pot, when you've got the liquid around the outside, what you're going to do is you're just going to force those bubbles in. And then, thankfully I haven't done this, but there's some horror stories on the internet. There are people trying to make good molds out of their masters. They put them in a pressure pot, and then when they cast in that mold, their dice are fuzzy, or whatever they're casting is fuzzy, because all those bubbles have surrounded. They've been forced inside into and around whatever was hard, and so there's little tiny marks on the surface of whatever they cast then, because the liquid is filling in those bubbles that were on the skin. So if you're making a mold, if you really want it crystal clear, no bubbles, use a vacuum chamber, not a pressure pot. Anyway, this was just casted open air. So what I did was I put the dice in a form, filled it with a good I'd say 1/4 inch over the top of the dice. Filled my silicone, because that creates the bottom. So the dice are sitting on the bottom of the mold. Pour the silicone in, and then I turn the mold over once it's cured, and pour the silicone on the top. So I have this cap, because another name for one of these types of molds is a cap mold. So it's 2 parts, cured twice, 6 hours each time. Total make time for this particular mold was 12 hours. Just did it overnight. It was fine. So gonna unmold this. So the cat, you can see I've already popped it loose, because I took a look at these, but I've not pulled them out. So I'm gonna pull these out live on the internet. Pause. So here we go. Here's the reveal. It's a pretty not a bad cap, if I do say so myself, because you can kind of see the impressions of the dice here. So these would be the tops. This is going to be what gets squished down into the resin whenever I'm using this mold to cast. And I think I'm only going to use this mold to cast a couple of times to get a couple of good sets of masters. These are the inclusion dice, so that's why you can't see any numbers there. They don't have numbers on them. They're blank. So here's the main body of the mold itself. So as you can see, there's only one face per die, starting over here with the Caltrop style D4. Then there's the Star Drop, that's what I'm calling it, the Star Drop style D4, D6, D8, the two D10s, kind of diamond shaped, the D12, that's the soccer ball, and then lastly the D20. So let's go ahead and pull these out. So let's go with, pause. Let's pull out the D4 first. So there's the D4, and then I fumble it. Fumbling the D4, so it's quite sharp, but it's also quite small. So I don't have, oh I do. Do I have a D4? I do have a D4. So these are actually the inclusions that I'm gonna use when I put stuff inside these kind of dice, because if you'll notice, they are ultimately smaller and will fit nicely in a mold with these numbers on them. So that's what I'm doing. I have molded the inclusions first, and then I'm going to cast those at some point once I get my pressure pot. I'm going to cast those, and then it's going to be awesome, because then I'm going to have some masters that I can then remold. I dropped it. That's okay. That's okay. So here's the Star Drop D4. That's very cool. And then next is the D6. So let's pop that one out. Pause. Here's the D6. Nice and sharp. I just kind of rough sanded these because I figure if they're included, so these are never going to be dice on their own. They are only going to be inside other dice. Dude, disguise as a dude. Playing a dude, disguise as another dude. So I figured they didn't have to be super finished, super polished, because I mean they're gonna have stuff inside them. They're gonna be painted. They're gonna be, you know, specific colors. They're gonna be glitterized, whatever it may be, and then cast inside another die with actual numbers on it that is gonna be super polished and super shiny. So I didn't see the point of spending a ton of post-processing time on these. So that was, what was that? That was the D8. So now we're on to the D10s. I didn't see the point in spending a ton of time processing these dice before I cast them, because I mean, no one is ever going to see these in their final form anyway. So I'm sure all the dice nerds out there on the internet are going to be like, "What are you doing? Blasphemy!" And to that I say, it's going to be fine. If you don't, you know what? If you want to only go with those folks that are spending time polishing every little thing and essentially wasting time, I mean, those are the folks. Well, I don't want to besmirch anyone, but I don't think it's worth it. Personally, I don't think it's worth it. I think there's a lot other more important things that I could be spending my time on. So there's the soccer ball D12. So since these are the inclusions and they're going in kind of a standard set of dice, they don't have the kind of non-standard shapes, except for the Star Drop, because I really like the Star Drop D4 style. So I wanted one of those as well. So these are these masters. These masters are actually from John's 3D Prints and Dice, and I'll throw a link to his Etsy shop down below so you can check him out. So he did these blank ones for me. He did these for me. So these numbers, I love that style. It's so cool. And he did this big one, the big boy, the big old D20. It's like, it's almost fist size, y'all. Like this is a murder weapon. But it's also cool because I think this is big enough that I think is going to be, this is plenty of room for some super cool inclusions. Specifically, I'm thinking of like some nature themed stuff. Like the property that we have here in the Pacific Northwest is full of nature. There's moss, there's trees, there's mushrooms, there are, grasses and plants. We have salal. Do you even know what salal is? I didn't until we moved here. They're edible berries, native to the Pacific Northwest. The actual native population have used salal for sustenance and medicine for hundreds of years before white folks got here. So super cool. So I'm really looking forward to doing some inclusions in those. So yeah, that's my. It's a little rough, I had some overpour and stuff like that, but for the first try, I mean, those look pretty nice, if I do say so myself. And it's keyed, so meaning that the lid only fits one way. So if you try to put it this way, it's not going to line up, and you're like, oh, poop, what'd I do wrong? Well, you just got to turn it around, dummy. And then, perfect. Fits like a glove. So yeah, so that's the first mold ever in the books, done and dusted. That's all for me today. Thanks for joining me here on the Ursa Astor Creations channel, the Patreon, the YouTube, the Twitter, the Instagram, all that good stuff. I'll throw a link to my link tree down below, so if you want to check it out. If you want to be a patron, great. If you want to tell somebody about the Patreon, fantastic. That's just as good as you signing up yourself. Or if you want to sign up and tell somebody, get them to sign up. Sweet, even better. That's double prizes. Or, just if you would just want to buy me a coffee, if you like this nonsense what I'm doing here, and just toss me a couple bucks because that's all you got. Cool. You're helping this guy not be a corporate shill. So, until next time, peace.